Recording now. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the Romans, but before we do that, I want to ask if you have any questions about the, I guess, any of the work you've done, like the, I see a lot of the vocabulary assignments for the form are done, and they're looking good, those that I've seen. And the also the cards, the first of the vocabulary cards look good. I think what I might want to do is...
Did you want us to
Go ahead.
post our cards?
Yes, I'll show you that. Let me share
I
my
don't know where
screen.
to.
I'll
Okay.
show you
Okay.
the place for that.
Okay.
It is here in your discussion board section.
Mm-hmm.
Click. Below this, Egypt, Greece, Rome. This one takes up a lot of space. And there, this is from,
Okay.
this is called in-class exercise, so it's from last week. And so if you see, we have, like here, egg and dart. This does the job. This one is done correctly. And also, this one by Zariah, the lotus. Nice lettering, Zariah. And so this is good. This is clear. I know what that is. And so they, you'll see, you might look at, you might see some. So these are the discussion board is open to all of you. So you could go through, I believe I have it set up that you can go through and look at the work done by your done by your classmates. So that would be a good way to see some examples. Okay, we're reading some of these. If it's, yeah, I guess I think the JPEG. Like that, I gotta do that. Okay, good. That shows what reading is. It shows it as a relief from the surface. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of what
Okay.
what to do.
Can you remind us again where all the words are that we can utilize to do the vocabulary cards? I
Yeah.
thought I saw a spot on there.
So over here, so there's a section vocabulary, and then these are different lists of vocabulary terms. So for this first section, this, if you click that, then it'll download a document, which is right there. Oops. Right there, which has this is the vocabulary terms with some simple but accurate definitions for them. Oops. So there. So over here on the left menu, presentations, discussion board, vocabulary, that's your list of terms. I got to update my 20th century. Here, this is the document for the vocabulary cards and the an example with comments. I think I went through these last week. This is a link to my YouTube channel for a video of drawing a chair, which doesn't have to be as as elaborate as drawing it using linear perspective, but it can help you to see how you build it from scratch. All right. All right, and yes, I still have to organize some of these. I still have to organize these more, the supplemental reading and web resources. And some of this, as I mentioned last week, this is for my, some of this is for my own use, but I put it up there so that you can see it too. There is a lot that you can do. There's a lot you can know. This class is really such a brief survey that it really does little justice to the amount of information that's out there. So like here, we're going to talk about mosaic. And this is from the Art Institute of Chicago. Let me dismiss that. Pause. Okay, and the guy here, this mosaic artist is from Italy, from the northeast region, town of Ravenna, which has some of the best Byzantine mosaics, and he demonstrates how to do mosaic. So let's look at this.
To demonstrate how a Byzantine artisan may have created the head of the giraffe depicted in this mosaic, a master mosaicist has invited us into his Chicago studio. Every mosaic starts with a solid foundation.
I create in this box a cross section of what we will see if we look to the substrate under a mosaic.
The 1st century AD architect Vitruvius described the ideal foundation as being made of 4 layers.
The first one, called Stumen, was created just with big pieces of bricks or pottery.
Next came the rudis, a mixture of rubble and lime, beaten solid to a thickness of 9 inches.
On top of the rudus, it's called nucleus. It's created with a mix of lime and small pieces of brick.
Finally, the setting bed in which the tesserae were placed was an even finer layer of mortar.
It's a mix created with lime and powder of brick.
Here, our artist marks the area on the setting bed that will become the head of the giraffe. Ancient artisans would have used a sharp instrument to incise guidelines into the mortar as they planned their mosaic, using string, nails, compasses, and calipers to help lay out their plans. Next, he uses pigments of various colors to designate where the figure in the background will appear. As he fills in the mosaic, these colors will guide his selection of tesserae. The pigment won't show in the final mosaic. To cut tesserae from raw materials, artists use a hammer and a chisel-like blade set into a block.
With the hammer, it's possible to cut very thick pieces of marble like this one with not a lot of force.
In experienced hands, these tools can quickly and accurately produce tesserae of exactly the desired size and shape, even from fragile materials like glass. As the artist lays the tesserae into the setting bed, he carefully chooses sizes and shapes to fit the subject.
With a lot of practice, just rotating the piece in my hand, I'm able to tell the size, the shape, and to choose the size I'm gonna place without looking.
Smaller tesserae are used for more detailed areas. He chooses materials and colors to fill in the background, and others to outline the figure. Finally, the surface of the mosaic is leveled by grinding the tesserae to an even height.
The pumice stone is a very soft and light material which can make the top of the mosaic very smooth and even.
Okay. So that process is was used. So the Byzantine the Byzantine Christian civilization comes after. It's kind of like overlaps the Romans, but it goes into the European Middle Ages. But it's kind of like the Romans are our ancestors to the Byzantines, also the Greeks too. It's kind of straddle both cultures. But the Romans would have used the same, as they mentioned, Vitruvius, who was a Roman writer on architecture, and so they would have used basically the same process. So you're going to see some mosaic in the presentation. So kind of cool to see how it's done, isn't it?
I have a question.
Yep.
So you have Melissa twice on the discussion board. Which one am I? I'm Melissa Martinez.
All right. Well, I'm sorry I did that to the Robins. Let's look at this. Okay.
I noticed atrium is also not on the vocabulary list. Only fresco is.
Oh no. Well, who has atrium?
Melissa.
Okay, so Melissa. All right, so Melissa Martinez, did you choose one?
Well, I'm gonna choose fresco since atrium's not on the vocabulary list, but fresco is.
All right, and is the other Melissa here?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, and what is your last name, Melissa?
Castro.
All right, Melissa Castro. So atrium. I guess I can look to see if you did this. But so the atrium is from Roman architecture, and I'm going to say, with the wonders of the internet. Oops, atrium. Ta-da! There you go. We're going to look at. We're going to see some of this. We're going to look at some pictures of the excavations of Pompeii. So you will find out. You will learn about the atrium today, if you haven't already. So I'm sorry about that. I'll make sure that this is cleared up.
Thank you. Do you want me to go ahead and do fresco then?
Is that Melissa Martinez?
Yes.
Yes. You can go right
Okay.
ahead and do. You can do here. I'm going to edit this. Melissa M. So. C. Okay, thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Thank you.
There we go. Got it. All right. Stop popping down on me. Okay. Okay, so a little bit leading up to the Romans. So we've talked about the ancient Egyptians. We've talked about the ancient Greeks, and I wanted to remember to I guess specify the the Egyptians and the Greeks overlapped, and they knew each other through trade. and mostly through the dominance of the Egyptians. But eventually the Greeks became a more, they sort of split off into their own sophisticated civilization that separated from the Egyptians. The earlier period of Greek civilization, in terms of artwork, the very simple stuff, like really the earliest versions of their I guess activity is called the geometric period, which is geometric decoration on their pottery. That is followed by the archaic period, which is, really more like very derivative of the Egyptians. And then the classical period, that is the like what we know of with like the Parthenon and the like very realistic figurative sculpture, the more like development of literature, like the really sophisticated like drama, comedies and dramas, which gave us some like Oedipus Rex, which is which really can be presented as a very modern story even today. After that, there is what is called the Hellenistic period. So as the classical period, so this like classical age of Greece, which is really centered around the city-state of Athens. The Greek like peninsula, that whole region, they were not a unified country. You had like Sparta was its own municipality. Athens was a municipality. Corinth, Megara, all these like just you don't need to know all of them. Athens was the one that we usually look at because that's where most of the stuff happened. Most of the stuff that we like, probably some of the best, most of the best stuff. Athens and Corinth were the two dominant cities. Sparta was known mostly for being very militaristic, and they were usually fighting. I mean, they were always fighting somebody. All of them. They were like fighting for dominance of whatever region they lived in, and so. But the Spartans were not known for having done much in terms of culture. They were not that interested. They were interested in warfare, and some of the best olives come from that region around the city of Sparta. Okay, so after the Greeks, they kind of started to fade around the end of the 5th century before the Common Era, and in the 4th century, in the 3rd century, Alexander the Great. Have any of you heard of Alexander the Great?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so, and what do you remember? What do you know about him? In general.
It's been a long time, but I remember like the war with the big wooden horse.
Yeah, he tried
Well,
to
didn't
conquer
Alexander
I'm
the
like
world.
probably totally off.
Alexander the Great was in love with Cleopatra?
Yeah. So, well, you have the Mark Antony was the guy with Cleopatra, who was Roman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Alexander tried to conquer the world, and in the end, he died doing that in somewhere in Asia.
Yes. Yeah. So conquest was Alexander the Great's thing. He built an army. He was from the north, around he was known as like he was like what was known as Macedonia, and both the Greeks and the Macedonians today like to claim Alexander as their own. And he really was very restless, and so he conquered the Greek, all the Greek city-states, and then he just went, he just kind of like went east with his army, establishing cities and fighting wars, winning wars, and he did make it all the way to India. So he spread like Greek, or like this approximation of Greek culture farther east, and that is called Hellenistic. The Greeks refer to Greece as Hellas, spelled Hellas, and so usually something that is Greek is called Hellenic, and something that is like Greek is called Hellenistic. So if you see, like, Hellenistic usually means it's referring to something like that's sort of the classical world, the ancient world after the classical era of the Greeks. And a lot of that got up into the Italian peninsula, which was, the Greeks already had colonies up there, but with Alexander spread a lot of Greek culture all over the place. So the Romans picked up on, in terms of culture, they relied on the Greeks for the models that they followed in sculpture, in architecture. And what the Romans were really, really good at was engineering, and I guess maybe like urban planning. They developed, they built the very large viaducts to transport water from the hills around Rome down into Rome, so that they could have fresh water to, for this growing population. So here, this slide up on the screen is a model that is a recreation of Rome at its height. There are two, like, you might hear about the Roman Republic or the Roman Empire, and the Roman Republic ends around like with Julius Caesar. So the Roman Empire lasts a lot longer. It really becomes like, and with Julius Caesar, they become more about conquest, like Alexander the Great, and so they spread out from Rome. Oops. Um, the Italian peninsula, and then they get up into like Europe, where Germany, France, up into what is now England. Those places weren't called. They weren't nations the way they are now, but they were sort of like the beginnings of those nations. Okay, so Rome. Here's so this is a Roman temple, and you can see that it's using the Corinthian order. With that, you can see the kind of like flower, like the leafy capital on the column. That is a Corinthian column. It's very much like a Greek temple, except that it's set up like what's called the stylobate, which is like really like the top platform of the base of a temple. The Romans set it up basically like a bigger, like taller platform with a stairway only going up the front. The Greeks, so here's like this is the Parthenon. The Greeks had really like a platform with steps all the way around so that you could enter from any direction, and there would be this like colonnade all the way around, and then the interior, the cell, would be sort of like smaller, underneath the roof. The Romans just have like an entrance, and you see the wall goes all the way out to the columns. So there are differences. The Romans just came up with their own version that suited their purposes. All right, so um, the Romans were very good at perfecting the use of the arch, which led to the barrel vault, which led to the groin vault. Arch, vault, and dome are three architectural features that the Romans they were really good at. They really developed them. As I think I mentioned last week or the week before, these were known to the Greeks and the Egyptians, but they didn't really use them. They didn't have the engineering down to be able to make them light enough that they could actually stand up, because stone is heavy, and if you don't get the engineering right, it'll all just be too heavy to stand. So the arch has that keystone in the top, which really holds it together. I've seen video of people architecture students building an arch, and you stack the stones on each side, and you put a wooden armature on the inside so that they can that's like the shape of the doorway, and then you stack those stones of the curve up both sides, and then you set the keystone in, and then it holds it. Then you can take the wooden structure out, and the arch will stand up, because the weight of the arch just kind of presses in on itself, and keeps it from falling down. And a barrel vault is really as an engineering solution, looks a lot like it's a series of arches. It's not really just a bunch of arches sitting against each other, because you see the way the stones are offset, but it really is it's a really long arch, is what a barrel vault is. The groin vault is two barrel vaults meeting at a right angle. So you can see where that cross in the center, there's a barrel vault this way and a barrel vault that way. And then the groin is where they intersect. And so it opens up this space underneath. So they were really good at solving some of the problems that the Greeks and the Egyptians had with architecture, that if they wanted to make something big, they had to make it massive. And these engineering innovations allowed them to create taller and more open structure on the interior. All right, so bridges are a really good structure to use arches on. And this is an ancient bridge, an ancient Roman bridge that is still standing and still being used. This is a artist's reconstruction, I guess it's an artist's rendition of a section. It wasn't, you can see that it's for the illustration, the side of the building is cut away so you can see the interior of it. The Baths of Diocletian in Rome from around 298, 306, that's of the Common Era, or AD, as we used to say. And so you can see how the groin vault is sitting up on these. So there's a column, and then you get the groin vault starting. So it really just opens up the space, underneath. And so this is a big, wide, big open bath. You can see the kind of decorative ornament they put, that they included, and they really enjoyed covering all the surfaces with fresco and mosaic. So they painted it. Some of it is mosaic. But up on the ceiling, they did a lot of, the walls and the ceiling and the vaults. Those are painted. here is Pennsylvania Station in New York City, which unfortunately is demolished. But you can see that this Beaux-Arts style of neoclassicism that was popular in the late 19th and early 20th centuries used a lot of the same, this big heroic Roman architecture was their model. So it's really just there's no effort to hide the influence of the Romans here. All right, the Pantheon. Pantheon built in the first, 125 to 128 of the Common Era. So Greek temple facade, like that porch, is very much like a Greek temple with the triangular pediment and the colonnade. It's really just kind of sitting on the, not raised up off the ground much at all. And then behind it is this sort of cylinder and then a dome. And the interior of it, oh, there's another shot of it. You can see the side of the cylinder a little bit better. Okay. And the Romans, they made adjustments to the Greek orders based on their own desires and needs. All right. Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. is, they definitely were looking at the Pantheon. It's quite beautiful. And Jefferson's home at Monticello. All right, so here's the interior of the Pantheon. It is made of concrete. So the Romans developed concrete as a building material, and they used it they used it for a lot of applications. I have read that they used it to build, they made clam farms, like clam beds in the sea, and they poured concrete to create sort of flat, slightly underwater platforms to grow clams and harvest them. So this there's the dome, and then the oculus is the big circular opening at the top to let light in, kind of doing the same job as the clerestory windows and an Egyptian hypostyle hall. But this is, for something that was built, I guess it's 1900 years ago. It's impressive in its scale. It is quite tall. Okay, so this is some vocabulary to go with Roman domestic architecture. So here you have temple architecture. So Pantheon is really the house of all the gods. And these are the Roman gods are version, really sort of also lifted from the Greeks. Their god Jupiter is really a copy of the Greek god Zeus. And so they didn't, it's funny to see that the Romans, they could be so skilled and so intelligent with engineering and just feats of urban planning, that they really didn't have a lot of ideas culturally. I mean, they weren't dumb, but they just, they really didn't seem to be their strength. So they just lifted it from the Greeks. Okay, so a villa or via, a large house arranged around a courtyard. Domus, a Roman house for the upper class, and cubiculum, a small room in a Roman house. Here's a section, a reconstruction, I guess an artist's rendition of a Roman house. Now we do have very good information about what Roman domestic architecture looked like because of the ancient city of Pompeii, which we'll see some slides of. But here shows the layout. You can see the garden, the sort of like that garden to the right. Okay, so here's a ground plan for a house, a ground plan of House of the Tragic Poet. A lot of the names of the houses at Pompeii are based on what was what was found when Pompeii was excavated. So, and do any of you know the story of Pompeii?
Volcanic eruption.
Volcanic eruption. And so Pompeii was an ancient city south of Rome. Mount Vesuvius is an active volcano, and the eruption. So there were two. There was another city called Herculaneum nearby, and the lava flow hit Herculaneum and wiped it out. And what Pompeii got was a lot of really light ash, like stone and ash. It fell very quickly. People died very quickly, and it buried Pompeii quickly. But when Pompeii was rediscovered in people have been excavating Pompeii since about the 18th century, so the 1700s. And what they discovered is that the ash it's sort of like light stone, like pumice and ash. It's very easy to remove, like relatively easy to remove it, because it didn't harden. It doesn't really harden that much, but it also preserved everything really, really well. So you see, people were very quickly the volcanoes erupting. There's this ash and stone raining down. Like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And people just people suffocated because it also just killed the oxygen. And people died just with armloads of their belongings. People died trying to protect loved ones, and a lot of them just they died right where they were. So it's a very interesting. It created this it preserved better than anything else of this era. What this architecture, really what this city looked like. Okay, so this is a vestibule into the atrium of a Roman domus in Pompeii with extensive floor mosaic design. So the atrium, so here the mosaic is, you saw the little video, fragmented image produced by fixing small pieces of stone and glass tile to a surface such as a wall or floor. And you saw that process. So here, a guard dog in the mosaic, and there's a little pup back in there. That hole over here, this would have been like a small fountain, and above it, you see lights coming in because there's a rectangular opening above it to the sky. There you go, kind of like that. So this is an atrium. Is this center? Really, it's kind of like a central feature in a Roman house. And similar to the oculus in the Pantheon, and similar to clerestory windows, this is here to let in light and air. And with a relatively dry climate, you know, if it rains a little bit, it's okay, and mostly it's just going to be, you know, the weather's going to be good. Okay, so a portico is a roof supported by, like a porch with a roof supported by columns, and a peristyle garden is this garden inside this, you know, really it's like an interior garden. And you can see frescoes, evident, there's sort of like remnants of the frescoes on the walls. The you know, the eruption of Vesuvius and just burying this city very quickly preserved a lot of this stuff very well. Okay, here is a Roman floor mosaic, 1st century. The guilloche. So that guilloche, look at that. It's a braided or intertwined ornament that's like all the way out. It's on the outside. Looks kind of like a, yeah, kind of like a braid or a knot. So having seen that little video of someone, like, you know, the guy making mosaic, you can see, you can appreciate the complexity of this piece right here, I hope. So impressive. And this is a mosaic niche in the House of the Skeleton Herculaneum, which is, as I mentioned, was also destroyed by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 CE. You can also see an attempt to create depth and what really looks like perspective in the mosaic with the angles, like the pedestal. Whoopee, stop that. This pedestal, like this angles down, this kind of angles a little bit upward. You know, there are shadows in here. So this is all like what is, we'll see this more, a little in a more sophisticated form in later centuries, called trompe-l'oeil, and it really means to fool the eye. And it is real, like techniques like applied either in painting or mosaic that create the appearance of depth where there is none, and the appearance of real space where there is none. It's not just realistic. It's meant to. It looks like there's depth to that wall that really isn't there. All an illusion. Okay, so here's another interior. Fresco. So fresco, does anyone know what fresco is?
Fresco is like a
It's a
mural on the wall.
painting. You have to paint wet on the wall on the mortar.
Yes.
It's a like trying to show a reality on like a real thing on a wall.
That's the trompe-l'oeil technique.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I got confused.
That's okay. So trompe-l'oeil is like an effect.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
the technique of fresco is when you have a plaster wall,
Okay.
and the plaster is wet. Like, so you've just made this fresh plaster wall, and then the last layer, you make a painting into the wet plaster with water-based paints. And as it dries, that surface, the painting really becomes part of the surface of the wall.
Okay.
And so so like a fresco painting is used in a lot of architectural painting because it's not separate from the architecture. It just becomes a part of the architecture. And the way they would do that, they would have like a drawing, and like in this case, they might use sheepskin for some smaller things. They might use like a light fabric, and they have kind of like a dotted line around like the contours of the drawing, and they would put it up like attach it to the wet plaster, like put it up on the wall, and then with like a bag of like charcoal or graphite or something like that, they kind of like tap the dotted line on the dotted drawing, and then they take the drawing away, and it shows like there's a little dotted. Basically, it gives them a guide. It's an elaborate process. I think more important for us, it's more important for us to know that it is painted into wet plaster. It means you have to work fairly quickly. You don't have, you only got so much time before you've got to be finished with your painting because the plaster will be too dry, and then this process won't really work very well. Okay. If you're familiar with paintings of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, that's fresco. And so is this. So it's an old Roman really like it's an ancient technique that I'm not sure who started it, but it appears in a lot of ancient cultures. The Romans did a lot of it. On here, so yeah, here this is later. This is in like what is known as the Italian Renaissance, which is really the beginning of the modern era. I think the term Renaissance is appropriate. It was given to this this era of innovation and rediscovery of Rome after the Middle Ages. But you can see this fresco on the left side, this left wall over here. This is all illusionistic. The exterior. This is all a flat wall, but it's painted. If you stand in the right spot, Elliot, get off of that, please. Oh, so cute. Yeah, so this idea of trompe-l'oeil, it's spelled T-R-O-M-P. It's a French term that's applied to earlier techniques. T-R-O-M-P-L''O-E-I-L, which means to fool the eye. We'll get into more. I'll repeat that later because it keeps coming back.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here is a fresco, a technique of painting done in watercolor directly onto into wet plaster. All right, and you can see this like realistic looking depth, which kind of gets a little goofed up when you can see the roof up here where it's above your eye level. You really shouldn't be able to see this little bit's kind of goofy looking. But here, the angle downward and the angle downward, it really seems coordinated, as if it's it's like they had almost figured out linear perspective. So beautiful stuff. So, and thank you, Vesuvius, for erupting and preserving these cities for us. Okay, so here's another Roman decorative technique of stucco. Plaster used for coating wall surfaces or molding. carving relief designs into architectural details. So it was used for, it was applied to a wall and then carved and painted. So it's like maybe like a cousin to fresco. I remember stucco as a popular technique in the 1970s with excessively textured walls, and then some piece of it would get knocked off, and then there'd just be a big chunk missing, and you'd have to get some plaster and rebuild it. So people were into excessive textures in the 70s. A lectus is a Roman couch. So the turned legs, I put that in there. Turning is when wood is shaped into a cylinder using a lathe. And I've got a video to show you, which is it's modern, but it's like somebody using just like a handheld or foot-held bow lathe. But here, similar to like the Greeks, there's a little footstool that slides underneath the couch. And there are these are not original, it's not original cushion, of course. But the Romans would make furniture like this in either stone or sometimes they made everything. They tended to make things very heavy, like iron and stone were like pretty common for them to be used for furniture. Also, like woven, like there was kind of like a woven, like wicker-looking type of furniture. The book has a little bit on Roman furniture at the end of the the third chapter. Is it the third or second chapter? It's the second chapter. Yeah. Which has this like stone. It's a stone replica of a chair that would have been made in with woven reeds or wicker or something like that. Here, Roman couch is called a lectus. And here, Sella Carillus. Stephanie, did you did the Sella Carillus for the vocabulary?
Yes, I did.
Well, it was a very good entry. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
Well, basically, it's just this X frame like this, and it's continued to be used even today. In fact, I have chairs in my kitchen that have the same design, and it was used for the the pharaohs and the kings for the royalty, and it was mobile, so you could collapse it and they could bring it with them.
Yep. Good. Yeah. So in the Roman, the Egyptians had it. If you had like someone of privilege, if the person needed to sit down, you would have attendants that would have a portable seat for you to sit on if you're out away from your palace. And in the case of the Roman magistrates in the Sella Carillus, so the Sella Carillus is a Latin term. So it's in this context it applies to the Roman version of it. And the Roman magistrates, this was used. It was really like the guy shows up, his attendant comes out, and like out comes the Sella Carillus, and that would give him a place to sit where other people weren't carrying their furniture around with them. And so it really became this symbolic, something that was symbolic of the arrival and the authority of a Roman magistrate. And interestingly, in your Stephanie's entry in the vocabulary, the fact that it was portable and had no arms and no back also meant that it wasn't that comfortable to sit on for very long, and so it's assumed that they were encouraged to complete their business quickly, and also understand that their position was not necessarily permanent. So lots of symbolism in this chair, and I have to say I think it's pretty great that you'll see this when you see some of the pieces in this, some of the furniture pieces we talk about, and then you notice that you have them in your home or you see them out in the world in other places. It really is a testament to how durable these types of furniture are. And here, this is later. This is getting into the early French. I guess like the earliest days of the French throne of Dagobert. So early Middle Ages, and you can see it has more like the or what would might be called barbarian. With this look, it really looks kind of Scandinavian, like Viking in its like the animal motif. The term barbarian, by the way, is a Greek term, and the Greeks, for the ancient Greeks, Greek. I mean, what could be better than being Greek especially in the 5th century or the 4th century AD or BC. And so they were really kind of full of themselves and the idea of being Greek. So if you didn't speak Greek, you may as well be barking like a dog. And for the Greeks, we say like, ruff, ruff, arf, arf. The Greeks said barbar for the sound of a dog barking. So you are a barbarian, which means you speak like a dog. That's the origin of the term barbarian. So really, it's applied now. It's like later it gets applied to people who are unsophisticated, violent, menacing, warlike, or just and somehow just like it's sort of meant. It's meant to project a certain inferiority upon another culture. But violence is always there's always this like the threat of violence from these barbarians. Okay. All right, and see this throne of Dagobert used by Napoleon for his coronation in 1804. He understands the symbolism. Here, Georges Jacob, a French furniture designer from the 18th century. This is neoclassical. The neoclassical stuff from this 18th century is kind of like a modern adaptation and reimagining of like they use Greek and Roman and Egyptian motifs, but they're making modern furniture. But this definitely has strong elements that we recognize from the ancient furniture. Bronze table from Pompeii. So here, this little bit of rinceau here with the alternating curving vine really attaches the leg to the center. A sphinx animal leg. Here's a garland. And then here. And here, this is this like Roman kind of like a basket chair with this kind of like woven. This is in a stone relief, but it shows an example of something that wouldn't have survived because it's made of reeds or, you know, some kind of just like, you know, it's made of wood. And relief sculpture, for those of you that don't know, is sculptural technique in which a design projects from a flat surface or a surface to some degree. Bas relief equals low relief. And really, it's just like a way of creating three-dimensional forms from really like on a flat surface. Can be done on a curved surface. But so this is how we know. You know, so this is one of the ways we know about ancient furniture is through artwork. There we go. Okay. We yes, these slides. Let me show you. Going to minimize you and minimize you. In presentations, if you go to the presentations in Blackboard, it'll bring this up. Egypt, Greece, Rome. Now, these are in PowerPoint, and hopefully the device you're using has some way of converting the PowerPoint to a another presentation format. Okay, we're going to take a break now. We're going to come back and talk about the quiz, and I want to review some things about the Greeks and Greek furniture.